Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. I am Dave Biddle. I am joined by Matt Baxendell. Before we get started, as Dan Rubin mentioned on yesterday's show, we're in a competition with the Michigan site and the Penn State site on 24/7 Sports to get the most 5-star reviews for our podcast on Apple. So if you're listening on Apple, give us a 5-star review. It really helps. All right, let's get to matters of business. Later today, Bax, the media will interview Mickey Marotti on a video conference call. I'm excited about that. He's the best strength and conditioning coach in the country. I think Ohio State also has the best director of player personnel in the country in Mark Pantoni. I'm about ready to ask you a question that's going to blow your mind, Bax. Who is more valuable to Ohio State, Mickey Marotti or Mark Pantoni?
It's like asking me which one of my children I love more. Good Lord. Both? The reality is that what both of them are getting paid isn't enough. The most important thing you can do in college football, if we're being real honest, outside of having a head coach that can set the tone for a program, is having a strength and conditioning coach like Mickey Marotti, who spends the most time with the players of anybody involved in the program. That coach has to be so on point. Remember how much hype Michigan had about Mike Barwis whenever Rich Rod got up there, and he was going to change the way that their players developed and this and that, and nothing came of it. Their kids looked just as out of shape as usual. OSU's players never look out of shape. They've never looked out of shape under Marotti. Their players, the before and after pictures are just stunning. So you could easily make the argument that it's Coach Mick. But then the flip side, how do you get all these elite players in? How do you get these kids in left and right, especially during a pandemic, unless you have somebody who is the logistical mastermind of it all? You have you've got a guy in Mark Pantoni. He's like the UPS of college football. He's going to always deliver. It's insane. Like the what we have right now at Ohio State with these two guys as your behind the scenes non-official coaches, nobody in the country even comes close to approaching the value that those two bring to the table. And you're seeing it in the development that Ohio State has had in players, and you're seeing it in the way Ohio State's recruiting. That's why Steve Wiltfong put that article out about how Ohio State's the number one school in the country right now for recruiting. And, he said the rearview mirror is a very, very distant Tennessee logo and no one else. And it's going to be difficult, but not impossible for other schools to even come close. That's a big thing for Pantoni. So I don't want to pick one. I'm not picking one. We have both. And I just people have to recognize that what Ohio State has there is a historically good duo. And, a lot of people credited Urban Meyer, and rightfully so, for a lot of the really great things he did. But Urban Meyer's legacy may end up going down as having set Ohio State up with the correct people as much as it was winning football games during the time period he was here. Because if the Pantoni and Marotti duo stay here for an extended time period with Ryan Day, you're talking about the word legacy being a very strong point for Herb. I don't know which one is more valuable because I don't think you can quantify it. They're both invaluable.
I like your answer. You really can't pick between them. I had to put you on the spot, have a little fun here, but I really like your analogy.
Jerk.
That's like trying to pick between your kids. I mean, I love that analogy. And it's funny when I got a chance to ask Mark Pantoni. He did a conference call with us about a month ago, maybe it was a month and a half ago. For some reason, time is just running together these days. I don't know why. But I asked him on the call, I said, Coach Pantoni, when Ryan Day took the job, did he have to talk you into staying? Was it a no-brainer? And he said it was an absolute no-brainer. As soon as he let me know he wanted me to be here, I told him I want to be here for sure. It was a very quick conversation, and let's go to work. That was one of the million good things about Ryan Day taking the job was he was able to retain the best director of player personnel in the country and the best strength and conditioning coach in the country. And Ryan Day is excellent, but having those two guys, as you mentioned, is invaluable.
You know what? My question, though, is that when Coach Mick gets on the call with you guys, is he going to make all the reporters do, Zoom quick cals or something? Like, that just strikes me as the sort of thing that Coach Mick would do. All right, everybody, let's get warmed up. 10 push-ups, like, just get everybody.
No loafs. No loafs.
Yeah. No loafs. Come on. It's just, I could see that being how Coach Mick started. Biddle, there's only 6 push-ups there. Get them finished.
I can do way more than 6 push-ups. I just want to say
Okay,
that.
I'm sorry, Dave. That's
want to
only
say that.
9 push-ups.
I just want to say that for the record.
How much time are we giving you here? Like, are we giving you like one set, or are we giving you like a half hour? Because I can see you 6.5 hours.
One set.
I don't know, man. I don't know if we can get you to 6 in one set.
Oh, I can easily do 30. Easily.
I don't know, man. It's Blur's Day, and it's been a long quarantine. I think your Adonis status is slipping away from you, man, with the gyms closed.
Hey, trust me. All I have down here in the basement, I do have a weight bench. All I have is 135 on it because that's all the weight I have, and then I do push-ups. So not like I work out, but I do push-ups occasionally, and I bench. So yeah,
it's funny.
If I have to do push-ups for Coach Mick today, I'm in good shape, brother.
You know what? What's funny is that my oldest is doing all kinds of hockey stuff because he's just crazy with it, and I made him a deal where if he does this thing on his slide board, it's perfect form. Right, then Dad earns a push-up or a sit-up every time he does one, right? So the little bugger did like 150 the other day. So I'm sitting there like, all right, I'll do some push-ups. So I had like 70-some push-ups I had to do over a couple sets, right? And I get down to start doing push-ups. The next thing I know, my daughter sits on my back, and I'm like, crap, I wasn't ready. So
that's a good way to hurt your back. My youngest daughter's done that to me before. That's a good way to hurt your back, especially as we're getting old. I'm curious to ask Coach Mick today just what he's doing to kind of motivate and challenge his guys right now. He is so good at just motivating his guys and challenging his guys. What are you curious to hear from Coach Mick today, Bax?
I'm curious to know and I don't know if we're going to get this, but I'm curious to know his honest assessment as to how this has set his players back in terms of training and how much time he thinks he needs in person with them for them to really start being ready for the rigors of camp. I think that's going to be one of the critical factors in whether football is going to start on time is, are these kids able to rehab? Are these kids able to build their armor, if you will? Because that's what this weightlifting is for football. It's armor. That's how these kids prevent themselves from getting hurt is that they're stronger, right? And I'm curious to know if Coach Mick thinks that they're falling behind from where they should be just because they don't have access to their normal facilities. Then also, and he probably will answer vaguely, but I'd like to know whether how big the disparity is between the kids he knows are in excellent shape and the kids who maybe aren't quite as in good a shape. And that may be for a number of reasons. And maybe some people don't have the means to work out the way that they need to because of what their family situation is. Or it maybe some kids aren't putting in the same effort, right? So I'm curious to know how long he thinks it's going to take to get these kids to a spot where they'll be ready for a camp, and really how different the conditioning is across the board. Because that's one of my big fears for football this year is that you're going to have such a wide variety in conditioning, not just between teams, but between programs, between players in the program, that you're going to have more injuries, and that's a big fear. So I think Coach Mick's in a great position to let us know that.
News broke yesterday that California State University, the nation's largest four-year college system, plans to cancel most in-person classes in the fall. They're going to have online classes. A lot of people are wondering how this is going to impact football. Does this mean that Pac-12 is not going to start on time and other conferences will? I don't think anybody knows the answers. I'm just curious to get your take on the news coming out of California yesterday.
Well, that went hand in hand with the Colin Cowherd thing about how USC-Alabama was not going to happen. And USC's athletic director came out and refuted that on Twitter last night. He said that he talks to Alabama's AD all the time, and as of right now, the plan is still to play that football game, which would be in Texas. To me, it's an impact, but we've talked about this before. If you want to do football in empty stadiums, you can do football on campuses that aren't really reporting while the students are taking online classes. So I don't necessarily see it as an impediment. But I do see, for example, with LA, an impediment would be that they announced yesterday that they're talking about the stay-at-home order in Los Angeles County being through the end of July. Well, if you have a stay-at-home order through the end of July, it's really difficult to imagine being able to get USC to start having training camp or UCLA to start having training camp the next week. So they're there seems to be an increased likelihood of the Pac-12 states where they're a little more proactive about the quarantine stuff. They're sticking with it longer. I could see there being potential for those schools to start late or potentially not have football at all this season. You look at some of those schools out there and, let's say they cancel all their non-conference games, then they can still play their October through November schedule if they really wanted to among their schools themselves. That's a possibility. And it doesn't seem like the calculus of the economics is really coming into this. For most of these athletic departments, you go a year without football. You don't have money for any of your other programs. And that's at any school. That's not picking on the Pac-12 schools. I mean, Ohio State doesn't have football for a year. We don't have the ability to pay for most of our sports because football drives virtually all college revenue. I think what's going to be interesting is that if California, if their schools don't have football, the rest of the Pac-12 schools are largely not going to have football. You might see the Arizona schools try to do something about it just because of the warm weather and the politics in the state being a little different than the rest of the Pac-12 states. But if the Pac-12 doesn't have football this year, it's not an impossibility. I will say this, though. I can guarantee the SEC and Alabama are having football this year. And if Alabama needs a team to play them in Jerry World in September and Ohio State's Oregon game's no longer on, then let's make it happen. Let's get OSU and Alabama playing in Jerry World this September. Because if the Pac-12 schools aren't there for us to play, then cool. Send OSU down there. Let's get it done. You know what I mean? Like that's a game that if you can surreptitiously fall into it, then that may be a silver lining of the West Coast decision regarding quarantine and football. And again, this hasn't been decided yet, right? But I will tell you this: if you told me to put money on one conference in college football won't play this year, that money's on the Pac-12, and it's not even close to who the second place team would be.
Great stuff, as always, from Matt Baxendell. Really appreciate it, Bax. You can catch his column on Bucknuts every Sunday. It is the world-famous Bucket. Again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. It really helps. And we're in competition with Michigan and Penn State. And we don't lose to Michigan and Penn State around here. Thanks again to Bax. And thank you to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I really appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great day. Again, Mickey Marotti, 10 a.m. this morning. Bucknuts will have full coverage. Let's hear that Buckeye swag. Best damn band in the land.